Let's go ahead and get started. So we will look at some, what I like to call Federated Agile Scaling Techniques. One of the points I want to make is that I try not to use any jargon because I work with a lot of senior leadership who get really confused when you start using terminology that's difficult to understand because there's a cognitive load that happens when you have to understand terminology. So you'll hear people say design thinking, lean startup, and then they're like, what are you talking about? So when I go through this, I try not to, whenever I'm coaching, I try to make sure that I don't use this terminology for them. Why? Because it just becomes too difficult. So these are our sponsors. We'd like to thank them. Okay, so when I called it the FAST framework because, it probably makes executives feel great that things can go fast. And the current scaling framework names are terrible. Okay. So when I think about my dad, it doesn't really put in my mind agility, And safety doesn't feel like agility either. Feels like I'm under a lock and key. And then less just feels like too little. It just feels like less what? Less agility? What is it? And Nexus feels like just kind of command and control, a very centralized name. And I don't know if this is SaaS, like it's some kind of SaaS software, or if it's SOS, like help, It's sending SOS signals. So these names are terrible, so I thought FAST is much, much better. So when we want to think about frameworks, they overemphasize products instead of problems. Remember in the last talk, he was talking about this customer centricity. So we set, in an organization, we set objectives to solve problems and create products as a strategy to solve that problem. There's a big difference. Okay, so if you think about this, when you're thinking about this customer, he has or she has a current problem, or a user has a current problem, and there are these adjacent problems. So not only can you look in the problem, the specific problem, but you need to look at kind of adjacent problems. And then there's this overemphasis on operational agility on most frameworks. They're talking about operational agility, how we do things. So if you're talking about those particular products instead of problems, remember problems are at a higher level, at an objective level, versus at a strategic level, because you will implement a product as a tactical solution for that particular strategy. And so the problem is competition is here in the strategic agility space. It's not, you get benefits from operational agility, but that's not where you're going to get, where the thriving of your strategy is going to be attacked. It's going to be attacked in the strategic agility space. And the business agility community is still talking a bit of emphasis about this operational agility. Agile HR, agile marketing, agile. So if you want to look at the STAR model, right? So you have a strategy, and then you have a tactical execution of that strategy, okay? So you have this strategy, and then you have the tactics that you will do, and those tactics revolve around specific tasks, specific structure, specific processes that you will have, specific rewards and specific people. But strategy is kind of taken out of that, right? Because you've already made a strategic decision. But the problem is that this exposes companies to be out-innovated. Why? Because, and this is something we'll need to understand, this image is for crossing the chasm, if you've ever read the book. So here you have innovators and early adopters. So they will adopt new technologies readily. But most startups, or they cannot crossed this chasm, okay? But your current products are here in this early majority or late majority. So what happens there? What happens when you're in the early majority or late majority? You're trying to maintain a particular position for your products. So what happens? Then the innovators come and they say, wait a second, we found a problem in the problem space. We found adjacent problems in that problem space. And then they come in and bring a solution, and so those early adopters, those innovators and early adopters start to adopt that particular solution. And so you're doing everything right. You're serving your current customer base. And by serving that current customer base, you're increasing your market share and increasing your market share, and you're competing with other people in that space. But then here comes this early this innovator that found a problem that you didn't address, and then now is creeping up trying to challenge you. And so that's why innovation practitioners, they like to bash agile frameworks, because it's stuck in that operational agility space. And they think these guys, and it's funny because everyone always uses Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Andy Grove of Intel. They use the same people over and over again. And they said, well, these guys, they're so innovative, but they don't tell us actually what they did. And that's actually grossly exaggerated. Okay? Because I say they all followed an agile, lean, startup, iterative approach. Anyone seen an image like this? Heard shoot bullets before cannonballs? Does anybody heard that before? Jim Collins, okay? So all of these companies, they actually, when they were innovating in their space, they shot bullets before cannonballs. So if you want to talk about the microprocessor with Intel, the microprocessor with Intel started in the early 70s, okay? They were actually in the DRAM business. And you can see here, they were deeply in the DRAM business, and then what happened? The Japanese came to the US, and they started kicking their behinds. So if you look at their annual reports over time, you will see that this microprocessor business is slowly growing, and this DRAM business is taking a nosedive. So it wasn't 2 weeks, it wasn't 4 weeks, it wasn't 6 months. It was slowly happening, and they could clearly see it, and you can clearly see it from the public record. So then in 1985, they said, we're finished with DRAM, because that had totally plummeted, and the microprocessor had really picked up, okay? So that's not a short time period. But the point I'm trying to make is they were running simultaneously a loser and a winner. And then that loser and winner started to change hands. So the DRAM was the winner at the beginning, the microprocessor was the loser. What happened? It switched. So it doesn't mean, so when you're talking about Kodak or any of these, it doesn't mean that you cannot run simultaneously a winner and a loser and then watch them switch. And here comes their market data, and this is their 1985 revenue numbers from microprocessors. So they were killing it in microprocessors by then. So they shut off the loss leader. So what about the iPhone? Every innovation talk I go, the iPhone just killed it. Steve Jobs, his great ideas. So the iPhone, Steve Jobs actually had an MVP from another company. He didn't even leverage his own production. It was called the Motorola Rocker. It ran iTunes in 2005. And so it sold how many units? 250,000 units. So he was able to do what? Shoot bullets before cannonballs. Okay? By leveraging the production capacity of another company. And not only then, he also launched something that looks somewhat like an iPhone at the same year. It was called the iPod Nano. And it killed the Motorola Rocker. But the Motorola Rocker got killed because the Nano was much better. And here Apple's iPhone sales. 2007, the iPhone launches. 1.39 million. What does that look like? That's almost hockey stick growth, right? So it's not this idea, this crazy idea that these innovators keep telling us that, you know, they did such a great thing. They were running things simultaneously. You don't have to. It's not like Kodak has to shut off their core business to go into innovation. It doesn't work like that. It's not either or. You run them simultaneously. And so this is what the highly innovative companies spent on R&D in 2016. These are really innovative companies. They're all the ones we talk about. This is what they spent in R&D. Who's number one? Amazon. Amazon's number one. And guys, I'm talking to you about this. Why? Because we need to take out of the complexity out of our language and think about what's actually happening. Because really, when you talk to senior leadership, you know, when you think about Agile and Agile frameworks, first it started at the team level, and now they want to tell us about Agile leadership. Leadership has been around forever. It's not something new. It's just they didn't know anything about it, and upstream they saw these impediments. Upstream where? In procurement, in HR. So over time, yes, the Agile people have been iterating across these other areas of the business. But the point I'm making is that, you know, a lot of times Agile people, not understanding the difficulties or the problems of that particular problem space, talk negatively about leadership. And this is the pressure leadership is under. It's a different type of pressure. It's a different type of expectation. So Amazon got an inquiry from the SEC. Remember those numbers? And the SEC asked an interesting question in their annual report, because they said, please tell us and disclose in future filings the total amount of research and development costs charged to expenses for each year presented in the consolidated statement of operations, because they weren't presenting it separately. So if you've ever read an annual report, you'll see line items of expenses. They were not presenting it separately. And so this was Amazon's response. It's classic. Their response was, our business model encourages the simultaneous. Remember I said you run these simultaneously. Our business model encourages the simultaneous research, design, development, and maintenance of both new and existing products. Okay? For example, our teams are constantly working to build new Alexa skills and simultaneously maintain current skills. And these activities are with a continuum of those described in this document. So we don't distinguish it operationally. What happens in a lot of companies, they throw the R&D in the R&D budget somewhere, and what happens? Why I'm talking about federation, there's a reason why I use this term, and I will explain it in a minute. When you separate R&D from business as usual, then you don't get the insights into business as usual. So, Federated Agile Scaling Techniques. A federation is a group of computing or network providers agreeing upon standards of operation in a collective fashion. So when you're thinking about federation, you're talking about agreeing on ways to cooperate, meaning You have running your simultaneously, as is your strong business, your core business at this time, and also innovation. Yet they're run collectively and they communicate. Okay? And FAST is a much cooler name. And it's based on a wider product definition that teams use to innovate by understanding the problem space. There are already many people trained and certified with knowledge of the framework without understanding its principles. This is important to understand. They're trained in the framework without understanding the principles, and allows the strategy to change in face of rapid innovation. So this is why and how companies exist. So you start with some corporate mission and vision and mission and some values, and then that gets trickled down into corporate objectives. That's where you'll define your problem space. Remember we talked about problem space versus product space. Okay? And then you have a problem decision. That's made in the corporate strategy. That's when you decide we're going to do a product to do this, to tackle this problem. We're going to do a service to tackle this problem. We're going to produce something to tackle this problem. Then you have a product vision, a product strategy, then a backlog, and then a product increment, if you're talking about agile methods. The main issue is that the product execution happens where? Here, right? That's where the product execution. What happens, what is that thing we always see, that iterative loop? If the product execution is happening here, where is that iteration going to? It's going back only to here, not up to here. Okay? And then we have, so you're going up and down, but only up to the product vision, which is why you're getting out-innovated, because you're not going back to the strategy. Because you're not getting insights back to the strategy. So remember this image. So these are your problem spaces, okay? These are your problem spaces. You have the new opportunities, that Kodak digital camera, and you have your core business. They're running on the same cadence. Production is happening on the same cadence. You're simultaneously producing two different things under the same problem space, because you're not talking about a product. That's very important to understand. You're talking about a problem space. They're not two different products. They're the same problem space. And why that's very important to understand, because when you're managing, if you think of it as a portfolio, you will not duplicate efforts across two different product areas. You will bring the intelligence from both to form your decision making. Is this clear? So now, if you think of your company as a problem space, you can descale the organization and descale the complexity. If we go back to the original one, there's some people up here, there's some people, some portfolio managers or somebody in SAFE, whoever is familiar with SAFE, there's people at every level here, right? There's a strategy department and then some other people, the senior management, and they're all making decisions, but too late in the game, because the information coming here it's coming only up to here, okay? And you have this complex, very large organizational structure. But if we come and descale the organization, then we end up with mission, vision, values, and objectives for this problem space. Okay? And then we make a problem decision. We're going to make a product, okay? But it's iterating back up to the strategy. So how would you do this practically? So you would literally, remember when he talked about business model canvas? So I'll tell you how I do it. Just, I didn't put it on the slide, but I'll tell you how I do this, okay? So in any problem space, anyone heard of a refinement meeting? Sprint refinement meeting, something like this? Okay, and refinement for me is nothing more than a design thinking, a group of design thinking sessions. You can bring users, you can go outside, you can get out of the building. There's nothing new under the sun, guys. You don't have, it's just people are looking at this from completely different perspectives. And me, having had to do it, I've had my own company, I've had my own exit from that company. So I've been a CEO, I've been on a team, I've been coaching senior leadership, I've been coaching teams. So that perspective shapes my thinking very differently. When you look at the problem space, it's a complete continuum of trying to solve a problem, trying to deliver innovative solutions, because you do have opportunities in that problem space. All you have to do is go and look and see what people are doing in that space and see what are the adjacent problems that we may be able to solve if you want to think about develop that empathy that he was talking about, to think about what are the problems that they're having related to the problem that we're solving. So, for example, if I wanted to test, if I was working on a system, I wanted to innovate with blockchain on my current systems. If I'm a bank, for example, I would have a blockchain product simultaneously, same cadence, and launch both into the marketplace. Okay, and so how you would do this? I'm in software products, so that's why I don't use business model canvas, because I like, if you've heard of lean canvas, it's very similar. So I like to use the lean canvas first. Here's the jargon, unfortunately. So I like to use the lean canvas first. From that lean canvas, I iterate through that a couple of times, okay? And then I have a basic kind of a Excel spreadsheet, and I start looking at costings just to see, is there business in this space? After I've gotten and this is after I've gotten the learnings from what I call the refinement, what I'm talking about, the refinement. After I've gotten that, I start iterate, is there a business? I work with teams to determine, is there a business? If there's a business, we say yes. Okay, we think it's a business on paper, it's not a real business, okay? It's not a real business. And then, from there, you go to what we call customer development. Anyone heard of customer development? Customer development is literally where you start validating those ideas with actual customers, okay? Then, if we can get validation and we go through basically lean startup loops to determine if we're going to actually get those customers, and we can convince 1, 2, 3, 4 to pay for this particular service, then we do the financials again because we have more reality in our hands, okay? And then from that, we actually have a business that we can start working on, the innovative side and the business as usual, okay? And you don't have to actually come up with a new framework, because these frameworks already exist. You can use this is less. I love less because there's no, it descales the organizations. There's no complexity that you have to think about, and that's why I talked about descaling. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you think about the product, you've got to come a degree higher, okay? If you want to innovate, you really need to think about this problem space, okay? And practically, if you can run this effectively, and the beauty here is that unless you literally have these teams scaled across, you can have in smaller, less 1 to 9 teams, you can have in less huge over 1 to 8 teams, in less huge 9 or more. And the product owner, the problem space owner, remember, don't think only as a product, but scale the product definition. The product owner or the problem space owner just assigns the team, once we decide assigns one of these feature teams once we decide that this is a viable problem space or viable product to go into to start iterating it towards the innovation on the innovation part of this. Okay? So simultaneously, you have the same product owner, the same problem space owner working on business as usual, and the federation happens. Why? Because all of these practices are known. I'm not going to go into the practices of less now, but all of them are known. So getting the information and the intelligence from both sides of what's happening is going to lead to better decisions and not being out-innovated by others. Okay? When we think of products in less, we think of a much higher problem space or product family, or it's not one individual product. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you. Are there any questions?
It's really well said, because it's true. As a company, like when you work for well-established companies, you're right. It's the level of the feedback, as I would like to call it, with regards to the product. It doesn't go up to the strategic level. It always gets fixed at the product design level or that level that you mentioned, and it doesn't go to the key decision makers, and that sort of causes a big problem.
And yet they're still making decisions without insights.
Without that intel.
Yeah.
So it just adds to everybody's problems in the lower level.
Yeah.
I have a question. How do you get those senior guys to speak to human beings on the customer?
Oh, that's just coaching. I mean, I don't go into, so if you see any coaching proposal I've ever done, we don't go into it without discussing with the senior leadership and them agreeing to the leadership portion of this. Anyone heard of Marshall Goldsmith? So I'm a certified Marshall Goldsmith coach, and executive coach and team coach. So one of the things that when anyone wants to change, he uses 3 words: courage, humility, and discipline. So the person has to have the courage to change, okay? And the courage, why? Because the beauty of Marshall's framework for leadership change is that everyone does a 360, an anonymous 360, with the people that report to them, certain people that report to them, and certain people that they report to, and their peers. So the reality gets shown to the leader's face, okay, of what his peers, what his direct reports, and what his bosses or her bosses think of him. And so some people may say, well, that's very subjective in a 360, right? It's subjective, right? Well, that's what leaders may say. They'll say, oh, that's subjective. That's not the reality. It doesn't matter. It's not the reality. Why? Because the reality is as people see me, not who I think I am. Yes, exactly. And so whenever we do any coaching, we don't do it without leadership buy-in. So, because you have to have the courage to be able to take that feedback, or else we can't really help you.
Any questions?
By the way, this is not a real framework. It was a joke. I hope everybody got that. It's not real.
It's just a perception.
Yeah, it's just.
It is real.
Yeah, it's.
Cool. Well, Phil, no other questions?
No, I have one. So, you said that you need to run simultaneously, right?
Yes.
So why do you need to keep the loser if you don't get the profit? And I know the Kodak, first time in a World War, they were producing the bullets for the weapons, right? For the guns. And they just kept it somewhere, and then they started the photography, right? And they went up, and after that they
Yeah, so you keep the loser because, so what happens in innovation, okay? In general, why other companies can come? Because you are maintaining your current customer base that is profitable, okay? And so this new thing you're doing will be a loser because it can't compete with an entrenched product that you already have. And so the natural thing that we will do as management, we will say, we're making a lot of money, we're managing it correctly, we're making a lot of money in this particular product space, and what will we do? We'll generally go up market, right? We'll go to where we can even get more profitability. So this is a strong product space. So Kodak should have never thrown away its existing, Polaroid or whatever that technology, the film technology. But you have to understand that at some point, this digital technology is going to take off. Or maybe they may go neck and neck, and then it will pass it over some time. That's why you cannot make quick decisions. If you look at the examples I gave, they were not 1 or 2 year decisions. They were the iPhone was not the winner for Apple, but it became the winner, right?
I think also with what he's saying there is, think of HP, right? So its main product was dot printers, dot matrix printers,
Yeah.
right? They decided to go into laser printers, right? But they cannibalize, but they put it in a completely different site. Because the other thing is, these people with these P&L will kill this, won't they? Internal company, right?
Yeah. Because there will be politics. Think of a yearly budgeting cycle, right? In a budgeting cycle, and how resources are allocated. If you think about how resources are allocated, people are pulling for budget, and so if you have a loser, the one who's going to win. I worked with Microsoft, so the winner was always Office. And what brought Microsoft back now? Anybody know? Anyone looked at their annual reports?
Surface line?
Office. They just cannibalized how Office was sold. Office 365 murdered everything else. So you just have to understand practically how to manage this. And if you do it simultaneously, you don't run the risk. It's just you have to be like Jeff Bezos, right? So he was constantly investing in the long game, right? So he knows certain areas of the business are going to lose, and then they will pick up and then make the business stronger. So that's a decision that the very senior leadership has to make.
And in that space, you've got to have different business models. HP is the world's biggest printing company, right? But the actual technology is Canon. Every HP printer is actually Canon OEM. Because HP doesn't make printers, Canon does. But to enter market in America, Canon didn't have the software, HP had the software. But if that had happened under the dot matrix thing, it would be killed. But today, Canon and HP own all the printing in the world. But it allows that sort of freedom to innovate and push the boundaries of intellectual thinking. Otherwise, you get stuck in that.
Exactly.
That's what I was talking about.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.